Hi everyone, Rich Crescenti here with another in our series of videos making music with Melodyne, and today we are diving deeper into the macros, specifically the leveler macro. Now in previous videos we discussed the pitch macro and the timing macro, and this one works a little differently than those two, so let's jump in and take a look. Now this is a macro tool, which means it adjusts many notes or gives you remote control over one parameter across a lot of blobs all at once. This one particularly deals with the Amplitude tool. If you open up your context menu by right-clicking, you'll see the Amplitude tool. On any individual blob, you can increase or decrease that amplitude. And you'll see this little window right here. This window shows you the change in amplitude, which is why right now, no matter which blob I click on, it says 0 because I haven't increased any of them yet or decreased any of them yet. So this window always shows you change. What the leveler macro does is allow you to grab multiple notes and adjust the amplitude of all of them. However, it differs from the pitch and timing macro. The pitch and timing macro always have an absolute reference point. There is always a pitch that you are pulling this note towards. There is always a timing reference that you are pulling this note towards. With the leveler macro, you are pulling everything towards a center point that is based entirely on the selection that you have made. So while selection matters with the pitch macro and the timing macro, it is absolutely crucial and essential for the leveler macro. Let's take a look and let me show you how this works. This is based on the selection of notes that you have. So for example, first thing out of the gate, if you select only one note, the leveler macro doesn't have anything to do because there's not a range of volumes to compare. However, if you have two or more notes selected, like these two notes right here, Melodyne will analyze the notes that you have selected, compare the relative amplitudes or volumes of them, and find an exact middle point. And then the way that it works is it takes notes that are below that middle point and bring them up, and notes that are above that middle point and bring them down. So it's not an absolute reference, it's a reference based on what you have selected, and then all notes, the amplitude of them can be pulled towards that center point. If we look at our sliders right here, you'll see, make the quiet notes louder, make the loud notes quieter. So in this selection that I've got right here, I've got one obviously softer note and one obviously louder note. When I pull up the slider on the left, the soft note will increase in amplitude. When I pull down the slider on the right, the loud note will decrease in amplitude. You can do this across any selection of notes that you have right there. So for example, I can select a whole bunch of these and move them all closer towards that center point. But again, that center point is entirely based upon the notes that you have selected right then. This is great because this gives you the ability to sort of even out a performance. And in any mixing or production case, I like this a lot because then we can use compression for movement or for creative purposes and less for corrective purposes, which opens up a lot of avenues while you're mixing and can make your productions pop a lot more. Let's do an example of this right here. I've got a loop created. So I'm just going to select all of these notes right here that are in the loop, and I'm going to let this play and show you how we can even out the performance of the bass right here. So first up, let's just hear the bass soloed by itself, straight eighth notes. Okay, and let's hear the whole song just so we know what we're dealing with. Okay, great. So I'm going to use this leveler macro now to even out the performance of this bass. Check this out. Okay, I like that a lot. Let's go back and forth. Here in Melodyne, we have this compare button right here, which turns off Melodyne entirely bypasses it. So let's do an A-B comparison with and without. We'll start with it out. You can really notice there that the notes have evened out a lot, so we get a much more consistent performance from the bass. Okay, great. Now I want to zoom out here a little bit and kind of show you something that happens that we can deal with. Now, I could do this across the whole track. And this is a bass track, so it has selected the melodic algorithm, which is monophonic, and that's correct for this track right here. But this algorithm is really keyed mostly towards vocals, and a bass behaves a little differently, so we may have to tweak some things. For example, you may notice right here, this note was not divided up into all its individual notes. So working with the macro in this case, if we were to select all of these notes, like so, I may try and bring some notes up or down, but you'll notice that one blob moves as a whole. So we don't really have control over the individual notes inside of there. And so we need to tweak the way that this works a little bit. Again, it's designed mostly for vocals. We're going to tweak it so that it works better for bass right here. There are several ways that you can go in and put in these note separations the way you would like. First up, you can always right-click and use your note separation tool and just drop in that selection and cut that note wherever you think it should. That's easy, but it's not very precise. So there's another way that I prefer to work, which is to go into note assignment mode. And then if you come over to your note separation tool, you'll see this adjustable slider right here. It'll normally start about this point. And this gives you control over two things. This slider on the right is your potential separation slider. This shows you some places where those separations might occur. And this slider on the left is your actual note slider. So as we increase this, we see a lot more of these come in. In this case, I think it is way better to err on the side of more and add in all these separations. And then if we need to, we can get rid of a few extras that have shown up along the way. But I always err on the side of more. Once we move these over right here, we're going to need to tell Melodyne to cut along these boundaries. So we're just going to select all of our notes and right-click and choose Reseparate Notes at Starting Point Lines. This will now take a minute because it has to re-examine all of your audio and extrapolate all those separation points and then re-separate that audio. So don't be surprised if this takes a little bit. Just let it work, and as soon as you're ready, you can pop back in. And we're back, and we see that all of these notes now have separations in between them. We can zoom in and just make sure that we got all of them. There may be a couple extras that we'll think about getting rid of, but for right now, I'm going to kind of keep those the same. Let's see. Looks pretty good. All right, here's a good example, right? This is one note right here that probably didn't need these two separations, so I might get rid of that one right there, just like that. So just a quick little bit of cleanup should get you all the way through. Now you've got all the separations that you need. You can go back into edit mode. You can select all of your notes and proceed to even out your performance while this track plays. All right, great. So let's move on and take a look at another instrument here. I want to look at our acoustic guitar. Now, the acoustic guitar is polyphonic, and so this actually gives us more flexibility in how we want to approach using this leveler macro. It actually gives us great sound design capabilities or great capabilities of leveling out the performance as well. Now, since this is polyphonic, right, the algorithm still behaves the same way, but now it will be doing less of evening out the performance, and now it's more of a sound design setup where what we're doing is adjusting the internal balance of certain notes compared to other notes. So, for example, maybe I would select all of this chord right here, and when I go to the leveler macro, I can bring up the softer notes and bring down some of the louder notes a little bit. But now what we see is some of the notes like this, which as you can tell is just kind of a weird harmonic, or these, which are other harmonics, those have been brought up quite a bit. This one now, if we click on just this one and look at it, this one has been raised up by 7 dB. So we made that individual harmonic that much louder. And we took this note right here and made it 2 dB softer. So this changes the performance and gives you some really cool control over individual notes within a chord, some of the harmonics within the chord. But again, selection is absolutely essential right here because it's comparing all of the notes you have selected. So since this is more of a sound design, you can just run wild with this and move and control any notes that you want. Now, if you wanted to do something different and control the performance, we need to look at this a little differently. So this is a case where I might switch over and use a different algorithm outside of what we normally would. And this is a perfect example of where the universal algorithm comes into play. The universal algorithm, I'm going to select that and redetect right here. The universal algorithm is great for any kind of time stretching, or in this particular case, taking something complex like chords and condensing them down to each individual chord instead of all the split out notes. So this gives us great control over timing, and in this case, level on this particular performance. Again, we have the ability to do both, which is really nice, great flexibility. Okay, now it's the exact same thing right here where we've got some of the separations have been made, some of the separations haven't been made, so we can do the same thing. We can go into note assignment mode and use our note separation tool to go in and add the additional separations that we need. Now, there are a couple of ways to do this, and I want to make sure that you don't undo the work you've done before. So let's start off with the first way to do it, which is manually. You can come over here to your note separation tool and double click any place you want to add in a separation just like that. The other possibility is to use these sliders up here, and these are potential note separation starting point lines, and these triangles that you see are the starting point lines, and then this side of the slider is the actual starting point lines. Once you make these new starting point lines like so, you have to right-click and choose Reseparate Notes at Starting Point Lines. But because there is no starting point line right here, we would lose this separation that we've done. So what I recommend first is to use the slider, make your separations, and then go in and do the separations by hand. Okay, so we've made our slider over. Let's just select all these notes right here, and we'll go in and do Reseparate Notes at Starting Point Lines. And this will take a minute. And we're back, and here we see that all of the separations have been made. So now we can just go back into our edit mode and adjust each one of these strums to even out the performance. Let's listen to this. Here it is in solo first up. It's our acoustic guitar. Pretty simple, straight ahead strumming performance. Here it is in context. Okay, great. So now I'm going to use the leveler macro to even this out, and I've got a loop on it right here. So here we go. Nice, I like that. That just evened out that performance just a little bit to smooth it out. Now I can use compression however I want to shape that, and the performance is already evened out a little bit. Okay, so let's jump ahead and look at our lead vocal right here. Now, the lead vocal we're going to deal with, and there is something that I really want to show you that's kind of important right here, something that will heavily affect the way that you work. And that is that with vocals, and some of you may have noticed this since we've switched over to ARA, and that is that sometimes when you pop on your vocal and analyze it, it comes up as polyphonic. And this is because there's often some crosstalk or some line noise or some headphone bleed. And Melodyne, because of ARA, is looking at all of the information. So analyzing all of it makes it appear polyphonic. And we've got a similar sort of problem right here, right? We've got some notes here at the beginning, which is probably just a little bit of headphone bleed, but it registered, as you can see that little pitch line. So now, since selection matters, if we were to select all of these, like so, and try and even them out, we've got one note that is incredibly soft. So this is going to throw off where our midpoint is. So if I try and adjust the quiet notes and make them louder, as you look at these blobs, nothing is really happening right here because the low note is not this one. The low note is this right here. So in order to avoid that, I just look for these kind of things and go ahead and get rid of them, right? You can just highlight all of these and delete them. And now I just want to make sure that I haven't cut off anything super valuable.
Let's stay in a hotel, get a break from this hell. In a different mirror, we'll see ourselves.
Great. Okay. Let's clean this up just a little bit right here so we've got a better place to start from. Now, in this particular case, once we've gotten rid of those, you might still see some of these, like this S right here. These ones, when they don't have a pitch line, that's not as big of a deal because Melodyne views those as sibilants and they're not affected by this particular tool anyway. So you don't have to worry about those. I would just look for some in the dead spots where that little pitch line shows up on those right there. And now we can do the exact same thing with this, right? I can select all of these notes and we can just even out this performance a little bit. Let's listen to this. All right, let's compare these two. I'm going to start with it bypassed, and then we'll listen to it when it's back in. Now, I still may decide to mix his voice a little bit louder right there, but the overall performance has been evened out quite a bit, giving you a more consistent level and giving you much more flexibility come mix down. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this today. Thanks.